The opinions expressed on the Custody Queen Show are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for personal, professional legal advice. The persons discussed are fictional and not based on actual clients.
Thought it was love, had kids in between. You can count on us, we're the Custody Queens. Yeah, you can count on us, we're the Custody Queens.
We are back, everyone. This is Sam McBride. I'm here with Carrie Block, Jack White, and Dane Holstrom. Happy Saturday, everyone. Today we do not have our beloved Kristen Holstrom, but she's here with us in spirit. We are here for another episode with Jack White. Many of you may remember that the show last time was just way too short, so we've brought him back for 2 more parts. The first part is going to be about income available for support, and the second part is going to be about property issues. Jack does not need an introduction, but I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back. A little bit about me in 30 seconds or less. I am a certified public accountant, but have spent the great majority of my career in and around family law issues. I'm a partner with the firm of White, Zuckerman, Orsovsky, Luna, and Hunt.
Which is a sentence in and of itself.
It most certainly is, and if you can recite that back to me, you're doing better than half the people. So, as I mentioned, I do a lot of family law work, both related to income, determining cash flow, helping with support, as well as property issues and tracing. And I know we'll get to that a little bit more in a separate episode, so I'll leave that for a later date.
Absolutely. And for everyone that knows our reoccurring guests, Dane and Carrie, Dane Holstrom is the founder and managing partner of Holstrom Block and Park. He is also a certified family law specialist. Carrie Block also does not need an introduction. She's a managing partner and a certified family law specialist of Holstrom Block and Park. Thank you guys for both being here.
Thank you for having us back.
All right, so let's get into it. I know normally we kind of get into an icebreaker sort of situation, and I know everyone really wants Dane to do his true or false questions. However, you guys have really inundated us with emails about and listener questions about support, and we want to give you, the listeners, what you are asking for. So before we jump into that, I do want to just briefly ask Jack a little bit about how you kind of deal with the court process and support.
Right. Well, typically I'm brought in when there's an issue on how to determine income or how to determine support or assist with that. Because a lot of the time the courts will start with what's on the tax return or what is on your income and expense declaration that you file with the court. Oftentimes those are not completely accurate, not completely transparent. That's where you bring in someone like me to help with providing the court information on what the answer really is.
Wait a second. Are you suggesting that people do not tell the truth on their tax returns?
I'm sure it's a completely inadvertent omission.
100%.
No one would purposely do that.
And are you further suggesting that when they fill out those court forms that are signed under penalty of perjury, that they similarly are not being completely forthcoming and transparent?
I'm sure it's just a misstatement of some kind, but sometimes they are not truth.
I am shocked.
Well, and sometimes it's inadvertent that there might be things the court considers income, but that person wasn't aware would be income.
Okay.
Or might not be something you have to claim on your tax return that we can find as income.
Yeah,
so
given
it could be innocent mistakes as well.
Given that this is going to be on the radio and they can't see my sarcastic demeanor, I just want to make sure everybody was clear on that.
People never lie in family law. Wink, wink. All right, so I'm going to jump into it. We have quite a few listener emails to go and get into. So the first email is from Angelica, and she emailed, "Hey, Custody Queens, I listen every week. I have a question. My ex-husband claims he's not making any money anymore, but I know he's hiding it. I believe his mother is helping him and hiding his finances so he doesn't have to pay me. Am I able to subpoena his mother's bank records? Please help. Thanks, ladies."
So,
well, where do you want to start with that?
I know there was
quite
a lot
loaded
to
question.
unpack there. I agree.
I think what struck me, at least initially, was that I know he's hiding something. So I think the question is like, how do you know, and what are you really looking at? Because the standard I'm held to when I go to the court is, how do I know what I'm telling the court is truthful? So I need something to base my opinion on.
Well, and if we base it on the literal question, is he's saying he has no money. That's like not credible as a matter of law, okay? Unless there's some really extraordinary circumstances. So if he says he's not making no money, but what kind of car is he driving? You know, what's his lifestyle? Is he vacationing in Maui 3-4 times a year, etc.? Those are the first things that jump out. Is there a disconnect between what he's saying and his lifestyle?
Which there are instances where the court would look at the expenses that they list on their income and expense declaration and see $7,000 in expenses, but they have zero income. And then the court, as well as accountants and attorneys, will question, how are you paying those expenses? And I think it was mentioned there that he's getting money from his mother, which there is case law that provides that if you're getting regular distributions from a family member or for someone else, that the court can look to that as income to you that's available for support.
Yeah, I heard the question differently than Carrie did. I almost read into it, because we see this pattern on a regular, reoccurring basis, where they are hiding their income by putting it in somebody else's bank account, or putting a higher level, they put a business in somebody else's name. But whether they're getting money, as Carrie just talked about, from a relative on a recurring basis, that's that, or if they're putting their money in somebody else's account because they asked about mom or grandma's bank statements. That's a separate issue about being able to get grandma's bank statements. I think the court would probably require you make some kind of a connection, and that may just be that he says zero on his I&E, but he's showing $7,000 and claiming he's not getting any money from anybody. That's just not going to fly.
And for all our listeners out there, when we say I&E or income and expense declaration, we're talking about a financial document that you're filling out and that you're required to sign under the penalty of perjury with the court during the family law process.
Yeah, and just to step off a little bit from what Dana was saying as well, I've been involved in a number of cases where there's often one litigant will say, well, I'm getting loans from my family, or loans from my friend, or loans from my brother, and after a while, they never pay these things back. It's just always looking like recurring deposits into your bank account, recurring receipt of cash. A lot of that can, on occasion, be considered income for support purposes.
Or it could be recurring, paying your rent or paying your expenses directly to someone else.
Good point.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. Georgia from Ontario emailed in, "Hey Queens, I have a question for you both. Ever since the pandemic, my husband has made his money by playing poker both in person and online. I know he wins more than he loses and he makes money. We have since separated and started the divorce process. I'm afraid he'll claim he makes no money even though he's been making plenty through gambling. How can I still prove he's making money? Thanks for your help, ladies. I'll be listening."
That's a potentially difficult issue, especially if the gambling is in cash. There's not going to be a ready record for it. If it's gambling at casinos, however, they often track exactly how much money you're putting in and taking out, and often you can subpoena the casinos directly to get a copy of his playing card, if you will, that will tell you how much you put in, how much you took out, and what it looks like.
There's secondary issues there too. Whether it's professional or it's a hobby, if you're making money on it, it's income for the purposes of support. Even if you're doing it for fun and you happen to make money. What's the guy that just lost $2 million on one of the football games? Mattress Mac bet $2 million on Dallas to win. Guess what? But he also was the same guy that did in the baseball series. He bet on a progression of games and ended up winning several $1 million. So that's income. If he's supporting somebody, that's definitely going to be income.
Yeah, and if anyone has questions regarding their specific case, or whether someone thinks that the other party is going to hide money, could hide money, or what you can do through the discovery process or through the court process, make sure to give the Custody Queens a call at 1-800-419-7772. That's 1-800-419-7772. All right, I'm going to go on to the next question from Teresa from Shadow Hills. "Hello, Queens. I've never emailed a show before, but I would love my question answered by you both. My ex has been ordered to pay what I feel is the bare minimum anyone could possibly pay, and he's always crying he makes no money. However, he got our daughter a loadable credit card and he loads money on there for her weekly. Can this card be used to track his account and prove he makes more money than he says he does? Thanks, Queens. You guys are the best.
Well, I'm a little confused. If the card is connected to his bank account, then you could get the information to subpoena his bank account to see what's going in there. So I guess that if there's a connection and he's directly loading it onto that card, then you could subpoena the information and get something.
Yeah, let me touch on kind of what we call discovery in general. It's going to really address all of these, because this is where Jack gets most of his information that he uses to formulate an analysis of what is income or what's available. And the discovery process is several parts. The first part is what's called mandatory disclosures, where you're required to disclose certain information, as we've already established. Sometimes people inadvertently, of course, never on purpose, don't
Wink,
tell the
wink.
truth or leave stuff out. So that's where your attorney's job is, to do discovery. Discovery can be first person. That is, we serve discovery on your ex and say, give us all your bank statements, give us all your credit card statements, give us all of everything financial that you have. Give us documents relating to every asset you own. And yes, I know you're incredulous, listening audience. Yes, we are entitled to every bit of that for a reasonable period of time, typically 3 years, unless there's a reason to be outside of that. But we get all of that, and then we start looking for things, and we look at transfers. Again, the next question is, when does Jack get involved? Jack does not get involved if we're talking about a support order of a few $100s, because lawyers are expensive and forensics are also expensive. You will probably want a lawyer far more frequently than you will want or be able to justify a forensic accountant. Jack gets involved when it's economically appropriate. I know we touched upon that in the last show, when it's economically appropriate, because the stakes justify it. And oftentimes there's a crossover where he's needed for income and for property issues, which makes it easier to justify. But if it's just income, then we better be talking about somebody who's making well over six figures in income, and probably maybe even 7 figures, to justify looking at controllable cash flow relative to income for support, or where that income is also used in a calculation for the value of a business or something like that. The other part of discovery is we can subpoena the bank records. We can go to Bank of America and Schwab and everywhere else, and his credit card companies. If he doesn't suddenly accidentally left out 2 month statements, gee whiz, knowing that we can all get them online now, we can subpoena them if he won't provide them, or she won't provide them. And so there's a way to get that information, and then we give it a cursory glance and look through it. Then we go to somebody like Jack and say, hey, Jack, could you please go through and see if you see something I'm not seeing, that kind of a thing. And maybe that would be done between the attorney and the accountant on a consulting basis. And then, of course, if he finds something, then we may want to bring him into the case so he can testify to the court as to his findings.
Well, and I add 2 things to that. One is sometimes Jack gets involved, or someone in Jack's role earlier on in the case, to help you figure out additional information and documents that he needs in order to do his job. And the other thing I was going to add, that I get this question from people all the time, is they say, oh, well, I separated on January 1st, so my income and my records and my information after that date aren't relevant. Well, that's not accurate. It's still relevant to support, and you're still going to have to disclose your credit card statements, your bank statements, your payroll records, which a lot of people believe that once they're separated, oh, it's mine and I don't need to do it, and that's incorrect.
And Carrie, can you share for our listeners what the standard is for discoverable evidence?
It has to be in some way giving evidence and information that's relevant to the case. So the thing is, so many different things in a divorce case can be relevant. So a credit card statement, while we might only be talking about income, well, if you say you have 0 income, but you're paying a credit card bill of $10,000 a month, there's a big question where that money's coming from.
Right, so even if it's maybe your separate property debt, it still could relate to support. So maybe if you can't use it for one subject, you would use it in another aspect of your case.
And one aspect I'm usually involved in as well, if I can be brought in early, is helping guide some of that discovery. Like, let's look at the accounts that are most important looking for accounts that maybe haven't been disclosed previously. So if I can get brought in early, a lot of times I can help with discovery.
All right, let's go on to the next email. This is Gloria from El Monte. She emailed, "Hi Queens, love the show. My husband and I are divorced and he filed taxes and claimed our children on taxes without me knowing. The court approved that we rotate yearly and claimed them 2 years in a row. What do I do?"
Well, as a starting point, and then as a general rule, I don't like to involve the IRS in a divorce issue wherever I can avoid that. It tends to very much complicate everything.
That's kind of a life rule.
Yeah.
Right. As to this specific question, I think there's probably some enforcement issues happening on the legal side. But what we're really talking about ultimately is there's a dollar value attached to that deduction. So we might be able to figure out what's it worth and just have a payment one way or the other.
And just so our listeners understand, a family law court has the authority to determine who should be claiming the children. There are certain IRS rules that say if it's not determined differently, that the parent that either has more time with the children comes into it, the parent that has more income might come into it, but a family law court can get involved and make orders saying one parent or the other gets to claim the children. And it's important to follow that because that also affects the amount of support that's being paid in the case.
Let me just add one more point. First off, normally a well-written order does not say husband gets to claim, father gets to claim, wife gets to claim. It requires an affirmative act by one of the parties that they execute the necessary form to release the exemption to the other parent. That is what is important, because that's what makes it enforceable. If the person violates an affirmative order that they shall, it is now potentially punishable by contempt. Otherwise, we're talking about normally not a very large monetary issue, and so it may not justify hiring an attorney and going to court and trying to get the money back on that unless you're already there for other reasons.
The idea is if you have these exemptions on your tax return, then you have more net spendable after-tax dollars in your pocket that are available to either pay support or help you yourself take care of the children.
That's a great point.
So your point about husband, why is always the husband the bad actor in these questions? I'm starting to see a pattern.
Well, those are the people writing in.
Yeah, okay, all
We're
right.
just reading our questions.
Anyway,
I'm just reading the emails,
but
Dave.
just to clarify, is that Carrie's point is that if somebody gets the tax exemption, then that additional money they get back from the IRS they don't have to pay in taxes is available in income to pay in support.
So the court's going to consider that.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's probably been considered in the original order as well. So it should be factored in. So if they're not claiming them as they're supposed to be, someone's being shorted.
And if you're not sure, call us and we'll talk you through it. All right, next question is from Mario. Mario says, "Hello, Custody Queens. Thanks for reading my question. I'm currently going through a nasty divorce after being in a horrible car accident. I wasn't able to work for over a year. Now the mother of my child is insisting I not only pay child support, but pay for all the after-school activities. I'm barely getting by with making the existing child support payments. Now that I have a job, will I have to pay for the extracurricular activities, even though I barely make enough to cover child support as it is? I appreciate your help."
Just pointing out that was from a man.
I got that.
So,
well,
just so
you're jumping to a conclusion that Mario is a man, but okay.
I am,
All right,
but
okay.
I think
Go
it's
ahead.
a pretty good jump.
All right, go ahead.
So, after school activities, extra medical expenses for children, all those things are things that the court usually addresses in the original order. The vast majority of time, the court orders them to be split between the parties. The vast majority of the time, and a good family lawyer would make sure that it's things that are agreed upon that are extracurricular activities. So, for example, one parent cannot sign the child up for gymnastics and soccer and dance and just say to the other parent, okay, now you owe me all this money for one half of it. There are circumstances where a court might, in certain situations, order one party or the other to pay a greater percentage of it. But if they already have an order it should, if it was done properly by a proper family lawyer, as well as the judge paying attention, to say that each party should be paying some percentage of that.
Again, clarification. Additional expenses. There are some that are called, refer to them as add-ons to the basic child support amount. And some add-ons are what are called mandatory. And that would be, for instance, daycare. It is mandatory that the daycare be apportioned. Far and away, the vast majority of courts divide that 50-50. The statute doesn't say 50-50, but that's what most courts do. The idea, the theory behind it is if one person's paying support, that sort of levels the playing field as far as income available from the household for the child. It doesn't always work that way, particularly if somebody's remarried, their spouse works, etc. Now, because the court doesn't want all that to be considered for the needs of the child of this relationship. But other things like sports, if they're not specifically enumerated, you don't have to pay that, okay? There's no obligation. And if you want somebody to pay, next time you're in court looking at your child support, you need to ask for that. And then there's, again, a good attorney will craft the language that prevents dad or mom from signing the kid up for 17 activities and making you, the other parent, pay for that. And that is simply that each parent has to agree to the activity before, in writing, before the activity takes place in order for that reimbursement to kick in.
So when it comes to child support, both Dane and Carrie brought up a great point. There's a lot of different aspects to it. There's the general guideline support order, and there's things that can be encompassed, as Dane was mentioning, either mandatory or voluntary add-ons. The more you can specifically address this with your attorney, the better chance you have of getting it in a court order, and probably the less conflict you have later down the line, which is important so that you're not running back into court determining who is paying for what extracurricular, was it approved, and it really just helps you stay out of court.
The problem becomes that when you separate or enter your child support order and your kids are 2 or 3 years old, you're not thinking about the fact that 14 years down the line, they're going to be driving a car and someone has to pay for gas and someone has to pay for insurance. So these things are also always modifiable, that as circumstances change, whether it be what the expenses are, what the parents are earning. For example, this person, I think, wasn't able to work for a year but now has returned to work. Well, his change in income in returning to work could affect both the child support amount that he is paying or receiving, as well as the add-on expenses.
Oh, that's a good point too. I don't know if Mario went to court when he had his car accident, but he should have. This is a mistake a lot of people make. They suddenly lose their job or they get disabled and they think they can work it out, and then a year or two later they realize they screwed up. Suddenly they owe 2 years of back support and they're in trouble, and the child support division of the district attorney's office coming after them. What do? The answer is you invent a time machine. You go back 2 years ago.
Exactly.
And you file your modification, because the court cannot modify child support except prospectively, going forward. They can't look back 2 years and go, gee whiz, we're going to make this retroactive to 2 years ago because that's when you got in the car accident. Sorry, it doesn't work that way.
And Jack, have there been instances where you've had to get involved in a case where someone didn't modify an order for an extended period of time and there's arrearages there that you might have to calculate?
I have been, but there's, as Dane's saying, there's not a whole lot you can do without an order that was filed back then. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think you have to be careful if you're constantly running to court filing for a modification. It's kind of like the person that cried wolf. Like, is the court really going to listen to you every 3 months?
Hey, stay in your own lane. That was great legal advice from our CPA friend. 100% true, by the way.
But if you're unsure or you think you may need a modification in your court order, make sure that you give us, the Custody Queens, a call at 1-800-419-7772. That's 1-800-419-7772. We can give you a consultation and kind of let you know whether or not we believe that it is in your best interest to move forward with modifying those orders.
Okay. I'm realizing we might need another show with Jack because we really haven't gotten into the big issues for income for him, which are things like controllable cash flow.
Well, I think that we have done quite a few listener emails, and I'm going to let you, Dane, ask Jack a couple of questions about that so we can make sure that our listeners hear from Jack directly.
Sure. One of the biggest issues where a forensic accountant gets involved is where, as you talked about on the smaller scale, is what is the income? What is it really? And so constantly what happens when you have a business involved or somebody deals in cash, both of those are really just, they scream out at forensic accountant, because wherever they're spending their money, whether it's buying a car, if they pay cash, obviously you've got IRS reporting and stuff like that. But if they don't pay cash, or they do some finagling or skullduggery or whatever to get it done, then they're going to, again, Jack's going to be able to use that. And then the attorney is vicariously going to be able to use it. But the most common one is where the business person pays personal expenses, in my experience, through the business. Okay, their kids are on the payroll and they haven't ever worked there. Their new significant other is on the payroll. Okay, and they don't go there. The masseuse is on the payroll. Okay.
Well, they provide a service, though.
See, exactly. So you get the idea is that it can get to the point of plain silliness. So how do you unravel that, Jack, to determine that this person who's claiming that they only make $5,000 a month really makes $50,000 a month?
Right, and there, I've seen a lot of silliness in your term of art.
Give us a couple.
I've seen the masseuse. I've seen the trips to Las Vegas and the casinos and the other adult entertainment you can do there. I've seen it all.
What exactly are you referring to, Jack? Never mind. I'm kidding.
We're running out of time.
Go ahead.
So a lot of the times I'll be called in to say, take a hard look at these business records, look at the bank statements, look at the underlying accounting, see what's in the numbers. Is it really office expense that's in the office expense, or is it something for the house, or their home improvements that are in repairs, or the children's cars that are in the cars? Is it what is entertainment, if you will? That's a loaded question. It could be anything in there. And a lot of the times we're looking to our clients to help us identify who's Joe Smith. Is that the maintenance man? Is that a legitimate business expense? A lot of the times we work directly with our clients in trying to identify those personal things, because in many cases it's that party that's also benefiting from those expenses. So it's really incumbent upon me to get into the financial records of the business, to really see what's there.
Okay, when you say financial records, it's not just what they give you in QuickBooks. It's you looking at the canceled checks, every credit card statement, all of those kind of things.
It would be very expensive, going back to our cost-benefit approach, to look at every charge, every invoice, every bank
So you just
statement.
look for the big stuff?
I typically would look at
stuff?
the recurring or the larger items, and also to get a feel for, are the records complete? Are they accurate? Are they pretty honest? Or is there really something going on? If there's really something going on, we probably need to look closer.
Okay. Carrie, what's the funniest example you've had of somebody claiming it was a business expense?
I think I was involved in cases where there was expenses paid in Vegas for similar type things that were clearly not business
What
expenses.
happened to what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas?
It doesn't in our
What happens in
world.
Vegas stays in Vegas unless you know Jack, and Jack can get to the bottom of it for us.
All right, I have one more for Jack. Even
Real
though it may
quick,
get
'cause we're
edited
running out
out.
of
My
time,
bad.
Jane.
Okay. This is a classic CPA issue. Is they've got a business owner that's taking depreciation because they've got a lot of assets. For listeners, what that means is the IRS may let you write off what is called a capital investment in 1 year, even though you may use that asset for 10 years. How do you tend to treat that kind of a situation when you look at a tax return where they're showing they've got $1 million in depreciation?
As a quick answer, I tend to add that back in the year it happens, and often I'll spread that over those years. Whether
Okay,
it's 5 years or 10.
so if it's a 5-year or 7-year amortization, you take that $1 million you took in 1 year, divide it by 5, and that adds $200,000 to the income in the year in question.
It would add $1 million to the year in question. But then deduct the $200,000 that's regular.
Thank you, Mr. Accountant. That was well done. Okay.
All right, well, I know that you guys have not got enough of Jack, but don't worry, he will be back for part 2 next Saturday at 8:30 a.m. on Go Country 105. Thank you, Jack, thank you, Dane, and thank you, Carrie, for joining me. Next week, I promise Kristen Holstrom will be back with us. And make sure if anyone has questions, give us a call at 1-800-419-7772. That's 1-800-419-7772. And remember,
Let love rule.